We're back with another Triple M footy news update with Tom Browne. My name's Rudy Etzel. I've got Tommy here in the studio. There's a fair bit to get through today. We've got some news on Carlton, Tommy, that you've broken this morning. You want to discuss the coaching landscape, and we've got some news on the game in Tasmania. How are you, mate?
Good morning, Rudy. I'm excited that you're back. I love doing it with Tommy Beers, but I want to hear at some stage about your trip to the Gold Coast.
Yes, I did enjoy my trip to the Gold Coast. Flew there and back on.
You went to the Gold Coast without going to Burleigh Heads for lunch.
That's right. We had some family commitments to get through. If you're interested, Tommy, I flew an A320 there and back with Jetstar. Very nice setup there. But let's talk some Carlton, mate. You broke the news this morning that Mark Lagudice is stepping down at the end of the season.
So this is the end of Mark's maximum term. I guess at one point he might have considered whether you could seek a constitutional change and go on, but Carlton's got very orderly board procedures down there. Mark Lagudice has been on the board for 12 years, president for 8. I think they're flying off the field. His legacy, I think, will probably be the new building that they've done down at Princess Park, and obviously the women's team, and they've got a very stable board as well. And Luke Sayers, who's a very senior accountant, got a PwC background, that's PricewaterhouseCoopers, and he's a business guru as well. He'll take over at the end of the year. So from a board perspective, it's very seamless, which is, sort of rare-ish in Carlton's history. Obviously, Stix's handover to Mark was orderly, and then Mark's handover to Luke Sayers has been very orderly. But there is some things happening at Carlton. There's plenty going on down there, Rudy.
Yeah. Before we get to that, just wanted to ask one thing about it. You mentioned that it was like a constitutional term restriction thing. Was that on his length of tenure as president or on the board?
I think it's as president and on the board. I'd have to just double check on that, Rudy.
Yeah, so you've heard some whispers about the further makeup of the Carlton board, Tommy.
Yeah, I reckon there'll be some further changes on the Carlton board at the end of the year. I hear that Jeannie Pratt will step off the Carlton board at the end of the year. I haven't confirmed that, but I'm certainly hearing it from a couple of people. I'm also hearing that Chris Judd, the current football director, who's got huge business interests and growing business interests, will also step off at the end of the year. Now, I've put that to some sources, and again, it's not 100%, but I'm just sort of reporting what I'm hearing on that front this morning. So I think that there's a good chance that Judd and Pratt will step off at the end of the year. Juddy's got lots of business interests and things like that going on. So it's going to be an interesting period now at Carlton, because I think there's going to be a lot of focus on David Teague, the coach, particularly in the next few weeks. Mark Lagudice, during his time on the board, has been through quite a lot of coaches. Now, I'm not attributing these changes in coaches to Mark, but I think it would be difficult for Mark to be directly involved with moving Teague on if it comes to that. So I think this announcement will also sort of free up Carlton, I think, to make decisions if they need to on the coach this year.
Interesting stuff. Big watch there on Carlton. Interesting about Juddy as well. Obviously, a man close to Triple M Footy's hearts, formerly of this parish. So, yeah, big watch there. Now, you sort of mentioned to me off air you wanted to sort of discuss the coaching landscape a little bit. Obviously, there's likely to be movement this year at some point. What do you reckon?
I think we're moving now into the second phase of the season where coaching talk's going to heat up at Collingwood and Carlton. I think it's doubtful at this stage that Bucks will coach on. Having said that, Collingwood's working through a process. It's not even clear whether Bucks wants to coach on. Like, he might come to the conclusion himself. And I think Bucks, if it comes to this, will walk rather than being pushed. He's arguably the club's greatest ever player. It's certainly one of them. So I think that's what will happen on that front. There's obviously a lot to play out there. And I think Teague's also under mounting pressure. Now, this is an adult discussion. I'm not saying that, don't sort of write a headline saying that anyone's about to get sacked. Hasn't come to that yet. But in the background, clearly you've got a situation now where Carlton and Collingwood are going to have to be thinking to themselves, if they made changes, what does that look like? And I want to discuss what the coaching landscape looks like, because a lot of people say, well, who's an alternative? Who's available? And I'm hearing certain names that repeatedly come up. The two experienced guys that Carlton and Collingwood, if it came to that, would look at are Alistair Clarkson and also Ross Lyon. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt about that. You then got like a secondary list of guys who are starting to get mentioned. And I mention this in the context that these clubs at some point, and it's a bit of who blinks first, this is all going to heat up now in the next 6, 8, 10 weeks, 12 weeks. So I think that the list that keep getting talked about are Adam Kingsley. There's massive raps on him, the Richmond assistant coach. I think Brad Scott still might be in the frame for a discussion. Lepich comes up in discussions, as does Michael Voss. Another name that clubs are keen to talk to regularly is Brendan Lade. So I think that's sort of the group that will get discussed if Carlton and Collingwood move. And it's a bit of a who blinks first situation now, I think, with Carlton and Collingwood, because this market it's a broad market in a sense, the coaching market, but it's also narrow. But I think Clarkson and Lyon will be the two ones that they'll definitely look at if they part ways with Bucks and David Teague.
So obviously, Clarko and Ross Lyon need no introduction. But let's run through the credentials of the other. Adam Kingsley, where'd you say he's at?
Richmond, huge raps.
Huge raps.
And Rutten and Carousel are now going, I think, reasonably well at the Bombers. Sort of strengthens that Richmond case a little bit.
You mentioned Brendan Lade. What's he doing these days?
He's at St Kilda, but has a Port background as well, and is often involved in premierships. He's getting a very, very good CV together.
Yep. Speaking of Port backgrounds, Michael Voss, he's still there?
Still there.
Yep.
Big raps on him. And
midfield coach?
Yes, I believe so. And Lepper's name keeps coming up as well. Was at Richmond and then stepped aside at the end of last year.
Kind of a free agent. He's got some media commitments at the moment, I've noticed.
Yeah. And Brad Scott never goes away as well. He's the head of AFL Vic, and I think eventually will become the AFL football general manager. If Steve Hocking was to move, there's no pressure on Hock. But that's the landscape as I see it, and I think that's where the discussion's going to go in the next 2 or 3 months.
Very, very interesting. Always on Coach Watch in footy season, aren't we? You want to chat about fines. Obviously, that's in the news because Jason McCartney's been fined for what
an expletive-laden tirade at the umpires at halftime, as reported by Damien Barrett on Friday night.
Yeah, I did enjoy the use of the word tirade. Yeah. You don't hear it often enough.
It's a great word.
So he's copped a $20,000 fine. That's not suspended, is it? That's
an actual fine which he's got to pay, which is a lot of money, 20 grand. Having said that, the club pay that, and it doesn't come out of the football cap. Having said that, when the Giants pay a fine, it's really the other clubs because the AFL fund the Giants. So it's quite circular.
So is there a push to have the person responsible?
Yeah, there's a push, and I think Gil McLaughlin's floated this with the clubs at some meetings or a meeting that officials, when they transgress, get fined themselves, which really hurts you in the hip pocket, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And especially if you've got kids and all the rest of it, that's a lot of money, 20,000.
Yeah.
And also even suspension. So a football manager, for example, like McCartney, might be rubbed out for 2 or 3 games, and that would hurt them in the hip pocket because presumably, I'm not sure they get paid by their club. So that's being discussed by the AFL.
Okay, well, that's certainly one to keep a watch on. There's a little bit of other news floating around. Dusty, it seems he's off to New Zealand.
Yeah, mentioned this Sunday night on our 7 News. It's come to fruition today. Dustin Martin will go to New Zealand to see his dad, Shane. Dusty obviously hasn't been able to see him due to COVID. They're very close. Shane's over there, having been, I think, sort of deported from Australia at one point. It was quite a formal process. He's close to his dad, and Richmond have been fully supportive of this. I think Damien Hardwick's gone on record this morning as saying that if a player wants to go and see family, they'll support that. And I don't think there's many players in the game that deserve it more than Dusty. He's an absolute beauty.
Yeah, it's really good. I look forward to the camera vision of him seeing his dad in the airport. It'll be really cool.
And you can trust him not to worry about training. I'm sure Dusty will just arrive back into Melbourne next Wednesday or Thursday, and I think they're playing the Cats. I think
they are
on
playing
Friday
Geelong.
night.
Yep.
Friday a week, and Dusty will probably he'll be very happy and just rack up a casual 35 probably.
Yeah, I was going to say pencil him in for 25 and 4 goals, just like the grand final. Should be great. And I say as a Geelong
There's a risk
fan,
going to New Zealand that you get stuck there, but Richmond think that's pretty appreciably small risk.
It seems relatively minuscule. I think it's
there's
fair,
no
fair,
more
fair
COVID in New Zealand than there is here. So
I think it's fair to back in the health departments of both countries. And before we go, Tommy, a little bit of news about the game in Tasmania this Saturday.
So North's game against Melbourne was in significant doubt when North were in enforced quarantine. The Tasmanians are also quite conservative when it comes to and strict when it comes to COVID. I think they've got a state election this weekend as well. Anyway, the upshot is that North are now out of their mandatory quarantine by virtue of a state directive last night, so they're basically free. And I've also reported that charter flights, the clubs are back on private Virgin flights for rounds 7 to 10. So I expect at this stage the game to go ahead in Tasmania this weekend. Having said that, it's not official at this stage.
Always on top of the aviation news, aren't you, Tommy?
I like to be across the aviation news, Rudy.
I love it. I think that will do us for this wonderful Wednesday, Tommy. I'll let you get back to your... what are you saying? You're doing laps around the tan?
I was going for a walk with an associate, a friend around the tan this morning, and I'm going to go home now and spend some time with Henry and Tara.
Yes. Lovely, lovely stuff. All right, well, enjoy the rest of your day off. We'll catch you again on Friday.
Thanks, Rudy.
Shut up.